paper is entitled Community, Peace and Justice, Relationships of Belonging as an Answer to Violence. I'm Luca Badetti. I'm a PhD candidate in disability studies here at UIC. I'm also a community coordinator in a community called Large. So, conflict and violence are realities that we are constantly facing, together with the need for peace and justice. In this paper, I will explore the reality of conflict amongst people, but also how people coming together in belonging through community can be an act of peacemaking. Our history has been colored by countries, groups, and people fighting to win and to be the best, to have more and to do more. The need to have power and to win is radicated in culture. If you think about all the generals and politicians that get applauded with monuments and names on plazas and cities. Socially, being powerful and winning is emphasized as positive. This, however, should be problematized as hegemonic forces and interior impulses that lead us to go up the ladder of success, pushing or leaving other people down, thus creating social inequality and conflict. We can differentiate between different types of conflict: personal conflicts, cultural, political, societal, and family conflicts. Personal conflicts happen when we think basically that we're the best, and we have a sense of inferiority that pulls us to identify with our certitude, so to speak. We either use energies obeying or attacking others and their values, losing a rich sense of ourselves. Interestingly, this conflict can influence and define the way we see our identity, whether it is our group or our individual identity. It seems that groups, in order to feel that they exist, they must relate to other groups considered inferior, or groups that in some way they feel are out to get them. The Arab French Lebanese Amin Malouf thinks that identities create a false sense of self whenever we proclaim that one of our allegiances is who we really are. And our allegiance usually is typically the one we feel most under attack. This way of creating our identity in relation to who our enemy is more narcissistic than introspective, giving us a limited and conflictual sense of who we are. It is also an easy and simplistic way of labeling ourselves, potentially victimizing ourselves. We might be drawn to such easy identity out of fear of not being, which might be an unconscious fear and non-acceptance of that. We then have cultural conflicts, when groups or individuals need to show that their way is right and want to impose it. We see that a lot in the history of persons with disabilities. From the beginning of time, people considered normal, oppressed them, thought they had negative spiritual influences, abandoned them on the streets, or locked them up in institutions. Leonard Davis calls the tyranny of normalcy. We also have political conflict. Those in power want to keep it and they want to extend it. The history of colonization is an example of this. The American invasion of the Middle East, another one. What happens is that often the oppressed people become oppressors. However, history also shows that there have been people that have gathered in communities, claiming their richness and their culture in the face of oppression, like Nelson Mandela tried to do in South Africa. There is then societal conflict, in which people seclude themselves in groups, cultures, their languages, but become so sealed that they create a certain elitism and rivalry. For example, people, again, who consider themselves normal and help people with disability out of a sense of pity, thinking that people with disabilities are inferior. That creates a certain elitism and conflict. And then there is family conflict, which is usually a relationship between parents and children. So the call for peace is an urgent call in face of all this conflict. What is peace, however, in relation to conflict? Well, peace is not just the absence of conflict. It is more than a polite acceptance of difference that's coexisting, but it implies actually meeting and approaching people who are different to the point of being open to create friendship with them. This means that we can still have our own communities, whether it's our friends, our families, our places of worship, but we can cross boundaries and meet those that are different. Coexistence can be important, but peace goes much beyond that and implies a deeper relational movement. Existential philosopher Martin Buber distinguishes between two modes of engaging the world, or the other. I and it, and I and thou, or I and you. The I and it mode is the most prominent mode in Western modern society. It basically meets the other person and kind of objectifies him or her. It collects data, it analyzes it, it classifies it, and theorizes about it. It basically labels a person. The other mode of engaging is more human. It is the mode of I and thou, or what Bieber calls encounter. We enter into a relationship with the other, we participate in the other, and we are transformed in that relationship. We're not just passive observers of the other. The you, the other, is encountered more than just the sum of his or her qualities. In some way, this distinction that Buber makes is similar to that which philosopher Emmanuel Levinas makes in his philosophy of the face. The face of another person is not just an element in another element in my world, but it interrupts my world. It affects my world. It changes my world with an appeal for justice and compassion. Levinas is thus critical of limiting the people we meet into frameworks or overviews. What happens in an encounter between two people as they look at each other in the eyes is a unique dynamic that cannot be fit into any system or totality, and which cannot be predicted. However, the I and it experience is what is generally most common. So we can move into an I and thou encounter that is most richly human, framing the other's personhood and identity not into a fundamentalist system, but into a revelation or even into a question. So the encounter with the other person brings us questions, not certitudes. This is similar to Julius Kristeva's cultural analysis of the origins of cults and fundamentalism. Basically, fundamentalism happens when cultural heritage is seen as an absolute certitude rather than as a question posed to us today. So thus far we have analyzed sources of conflict and expressed how peacemaking implies an encounter of the other beyond simple coexistence. In the realm of disability, there have been numerous stories of rich encounters that have helped people meet, even in situations of conflict. I would like to focus here on the experience of large communities as an example of this meeting way as a source of peace. L'Arche began in 1963 in France when philosopher Jean Vanier visited an institution for people with disabilities. He was struck by the need of friendship that people in the institution had, realizing that this is a very basic human need that he himself had. However, he could express it, but they were not in the institution. So he actually invited two of these people from the institution to start a home with him and create a community. He said their needs were exactly the same as mine, to be loved and to love, to make choices and to develop their abilities. So people began to be interested in this new mode of being community, and we have now large communities all over the world. People in large, there is people with and without intellectual disabilities living together, sharing meals, joys, struggles, spirituality, and celebrating life. So what can we say about relationship in such a context? Relationship of encounter, as Buber says, or loving relationship, as Jean Vanier might say, imply openness, vulnerability, presence towards others, a way of listening to and caring for others in a way that reveals to them their value and their gifts. When we love and respect people, they can begin to come out from behind the walls that protect them. They're no longer frightened, they can begin to open up. Here lies the road to peace. Peace is getting to know each other, appreciating each other, seeing each other's value, and receiving from each other. It is hard to define community. As Bill Gaventa says, community spirit is hard to define. We know it when we see it, and we feel it when we are there, but we also know and feel when it's absent. Vanier, whose way of definitions, uses various images to describe community: openness, caring, forgiveness, healing, trust, sharing of witness, coming together for a purpose, and belonging. It's important to notice here that belonging can be stifling, and communities can have shadow sides, and they can be oppressive. So belonging is for becoming. It should be for the person's growth, not to oppress the person. Of course, the journey in community is not easy. There can be conflict, shadow side, there can be violence. But this is where the journey of peacemaking lies, learning to live with difference and to value one another. Peace is thus not simply an external diplomatic dictate, but it is most fundamentally a movement of the heart that comes in touch with its vulnerable reality and that of the other person. In this encounter with the other person, we might get hurt. Consciously or unconsciously, a sense of disappointment or hurt in relationship is very common. It is important here that we have to understand that we are part of a common humanity where there is hurt, and in which each of us can evolve and change. In this sense, a realistic and not idealistic understanding of ourselves and others, together with a willingness to forgive, to be reconciled, which is a bilateral affair, and to enter into a process of restoration or healing, can be important aspects of peacemaking through community. In conclusion, we have analyzed different sources of conflict and have identified how different persons, including persons with and without intellectual disabilities, can live together in communities of belonging and friendship, growing in unity amongst difference. That is a journey of